Hey guys, I'm Rob Younkers. I'm a fashion and costume designer with 20+ years of experience, an educator and lover of all things DIY. That's why I'm so excited to introduce you to Threadymade. Threadymade kits bring you New York City Garment District insider access that you've never had before. Threadymade pleating and smocking kits are going to allow you to create things that you've never been able to make at home before, and they're gonna be key pieces in your new wardrobe. The great thing about these kits, they're accessible to people of all skill levels as far as sewing goes, and we cater to all shapes and sizes, so Threadymade is very inclusive. The other fun part, we're gonna show you the steps to create these pieces, but we also wanna know what you would do with them, how to put your own creative touch on them. So are you guys excited to start sewing? I'm gonna walk you through all the steps. Ready, set, go. Guys, welcome to the jungle. This is the Smocked Dress Kit with side seam pockets. How cute is this? You get a lot in this kit. There are many variations, actually 3 different ways you can put this dress together. So let's run through all the contents. When your kit arrives, you're going to receive 2 panels of smocking. 1 to cut for your front and 1 to cut for your back. Now these are gonna come obviously a little bigger than what you need because we want to trim them to your exact size. Also in the kit are pre-cut long pieces to create wide straps. So there's 4 of these. So there's a lot of room to play with. You can use these to create bows at the shoulder, or if you want to just sew a singular strap, halter. So these are great for that. And also spaghetti straps. So if you want something a little bit more sexy, beachy, you can use these. And then you will get 4 pocket pieces. So these 4 pieces will create 2 side seam pockets. Show you guys some of the options. Obviously, our first would be a strapless dress. Really simple style here. This is so cool. So you're at the beach, you want something to throw on, you're at the resort, you want to go out for dinner. This is awesome. Really cute, really easy throw in your bag kind of dress. So here's one we created with spaghetti bows at the shoulder. Again, these come really long, so there's a lot of room to play around with them. If you want to braid the straps, if you want to sort of cut them short and they're just 2 simple spaghettis, you want to do a halter, lots of options. To me, this is like really fun and sweet. It's the wider straps that you're using to create bows as well. Again, you can do a halter, you can do the 2 straps, or you can play around, create something all your own. Hey guys, so here with me now is my friend Meredith, who's also a fellow designer, and she loved the smock dress, so we're whipping one up for her. Hi, Mer.
Hey.
All right, Mer, so what we need to do, as you know, is get a bust measurement for the smock dress. Only 1 measurement you need at this point. So here's how you're gonna do this at home. Stand in front of a mirror, then Mer, I'm gonna have you take this around back.
Yep.
And guys, you want to measure at the fullest part of your bust. So Mer, if you can just turn to the side. Great, now turn to the front. And then what you guys are gonna do is just capture that measurement. Simple, simple, simple. Gonna take that to the table and start working on the dress. Okay, so we have the bust measurement. Are you guys ready for a little math lesson? Here's what we need to do. Because smocking is done with elastic, it has a lot of stretch. So the bust measurement we took is 40 inches. What we need to do is a little bit of math to transfer the correct measurement to the actual dress itself. We've created a chart to make this really simple. Find your measurement in the chest sizes. Then find the cut sizes for each panel. Each side seam has a 1-inch seam allowance already built into the cutting size on each seam. So, here's our front panel. I'm gonna flip it to the reverse. Okay. Now, chalk. So I'm gonna fold this in half, put a pin to indicate the center of the front. Now, this is exactly the same way you'll do it in the back. So we're just gonna do it once and then do it the second time for the back panel. So there's our middle pin, which represents the center of the front. Yeah, it's cute on me, right? Flip it in half. You guys want to make sure you turn things around so that you're really comfortable with the position of things as you're measuring and pinning and cutting and chalking. So there's our center front. So remember, we're cutting the front panel 15 inches plus an inch seam allowance on each side. That's 17 inches. What's half of 17? 8.5. So from that center measurement, I know it sounds complicated, it's not. From that center measurement, we're going to measure 8.5 inches. Okay? So, as I measure, I'm gonna put a pin just on the inside of my chalk measurements because I'm gonna be cutting on the chalk line. So you're gonna measure evenly all the way down. So 8.5. 8.5. You guys, I love these clear rulers. They're your best friend. At first, they're a little intimidating. What are all these lines? But once you figure them out, they are the best. I totally recommend you guys get these. When you reach the waistline, sort of at the end of this last smock, you get into all this fullness. What I want you to do is, since we folded this equally in half, line up your side seam, which is on the selvage edge here. The selvage, for those of you who don't know, is how the fabric comes off a roll. So if you're rolling down like this, you see this edge? This fabric, big, we in the shot there? This would be your selvage edges, okay? So we're gonna fold together on the selvage edges. Boom, boom, boom. Put a couple pins. We want this to be nice and even. I'd say every like 4, 5, 6 inches, all the way down. I also really love these quilting pins with the yellow tips. You're probably thinking, why is he using those huge pins? They're much easier to see, especially on a print like this. So we've pinned that. So we're gonna go back to our original side seam pinned line here, and we wanna carry that through all the way down the entire dress. So if I look here, now I'm gonna work from that selvage edge in to get my measurements. So, from the edge to the pin, we've got about 5 inches. So I'm gonna put a little mark, and then I'm just gonna smooth as I go. I know this looks difficult, it's really not, you guys. Just be a little bit patient with it. And make sure you have a nice big space to work on. The fabric's slippery, but challenge yourself. Try something that's a little bit more difficult than you've done before. So I'm gonna measure in 5. My chalk line. So as you see, I'm kind of smoothing as I go. You don't want to cut out this fullness that we have. Great. Do you see what I'm doing here? So we've got the fullness. I'm just kind of pulling it. We don't want to lose that. We don't want to pull it apart like this. So the smocking turns into the fullness. And I'm just measuring the 5 inches all the way down. Okay, now I'm going to pin just inside of that line, because remember, we're going to cut on the outside of it. And again, like I said, we're doing this on the front panel right now. We're gonna do the exact same thing on the back panel. As I said with marking, you also want to adjust things as you're cutting to make sure that you're in a comfortable position. So I'm going to cut just along that pin line all the way down. Do you see how I'm doing short strokes? connecting that line. The more straight your cut lines are, the easier things will be to sew together. Sewing's relaxing, you know, so take your time with this. I know you're dying to put this on and get out there, but we want to cut really beautifully. So, we've got one side cut. Pins are flying everywhere. See, we've got a nice even line. We're gonna go ahead and do the exact same steps on the back panel. So we've cut both panels, the front and the back. Let's talk about the straps. So in your kit, you have the spaghetti straps and the wide straps. So let's pull out one of the wide straps. So these are pre-cut for you. Very, 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 very long. This is so you guys can play around. You could tie the bows, you could just make a single strap that attaches in the front and the back. But let's talk about sewing them together. So, very, very simple sewing here. The first thing that you want to do is fold in half with your right sides together. The right side is the side that shows to the rest of the people. The wrong side is against your body. So go ahead and fold in half. Placing your pins every few inches. You guys can see how I use my giant hand to stabilize the fabric. This is very slippery. You want to make sure that those edges are really aligning. Also, you want to make sure you're not pulling one too far. So you're making sure this is lining up flat and this is lining up. So you want to pin all the way down. We're going to repeat this on the other straps. If you're using the spaghettis, those come pre-sewn for you, so you're just gonna attach those at the fitting point. If you guys like a mitered corner is an angle. So when it's finished being sewn, it appears like so. All you have to do is cut on an angle. We're just gonna chalk it. Then from the folded edge, that's gonna be my point. I'm gonna measure down, chalk this line. I'm gonna put another pin to stabilize it. I'm just gonna trim like so. And then when you sew this, you're gonna start a 1/2 inch in. This has a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'll mark that to show you guys. We're gonna go in 1/2 of an inch. Lightly marking, and then a 1/2 inch at your mitered corner as well. You guys see here, so that would represent your sewing line. Now if you want straps that aren't spaghettis and aren't this wide, you can trim these down to whatever size you want, as long as you make sure you give yourself a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the sewing line. So we're gonna take these to the machine and give them quick stitch. Again, do this to all four, bring them to the machine. I find it's really relaxing to sew these straight lines, really gets you in the zone. So let's go to the machine. Okay, so we're gonna sew the wide straps together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, starting at our mitered point. So once you get started, just kind of work your way forward, back stitch, remove your pin. We're gonna work our way towards the longer side, following that line. Now, as you get close to this corner, you can go ahead and turn by hand, and you can pivot. And then we're just gonna sew this straight line all the way down. Okay, so we sewed our strap. We got the mitered corner, pivoted, sewed this down. So now you guys, you wanna press this flat. This is just really quick. You wanna grab your iron, smoothing from the stitch line. We want to trim our seam allowance down to a 1/4 inch. Again, guys, train those eyeballs. I've gotten really good. We don't want to add bulk inside of the strap. And I also sewed with a 1/2 inch seam allowance because I like to have seam allowance. I like to have something to grab onto when I'm sewing. Sometimes when you get into the 1/4 inch seam allowances and you go right to the machine, it wants to go underneath your needle, things get messy. So I always prefer to have extra and trim it off after it's been stitched. So now we're gonna turn the strap. Here's the little mitered corner, all right? The idea is, this is the wrong side of the fabric, we need to flip it to the right side. Luckily, this fabric's really slinky and it's easy to do. So I like to have a little skinny plastic ruler, get yourself a spaghetti turner, and just start pushing that mitered corner in. With your finger. Now I have a giant thumb. You guys will probably have a less giant thumb than mine. So, two ways. One is with your ruler. I just take the plastic ruler and I continue to push, okay? Now, isn't this fun? Pushing all the way on. You left the other side open. This is where the strap attaches to the body. And look, we're through, okay? So now look at our mitered corner. That looks terrible, right? No, that's why we have the spaghetti turner. So we're gonna go inside with this guy. Do you see him? This sharp little edge, we're gonna poke that in. And just gently, you don't wanna push through the fabric, especially this fabric is very delicate. And you're just gonna sharpen up those corners, all right? See anything that's perfect? Look at that. So much better. Okay? Now you want to gently roll so that the seam is in the middle on that crease line. Okay? And what I'm going to do, since this fabric is really slippery, is just throw a few pins in before I press it and work in little sections. So I'm rolling that center seam. So now I've got a couple pins in place. I'm working in sections. What I want to do is go and press this strap flat. You guys, don't iron the head of these pins. They melt. I learned the hard way. So you want to apply a little gentle steam, kind of securing it. And what I do then is, as it starts to fall into place, I remove the pins. And then I'm pressing perfectly flat. I love this iron. Watch, it's gonna suck the fabric in so that I can press it beautifully. So you guys see, we have a nice seam in the middle of the strap. We're gonna keep pinning and pressing all the way down. Do this to all four. Then we have wide straps. So Mare's back in the pin dress. How did I do?
Good, feels great.
It feels secure. So listen, you guys, you want this fitted across the bust, of course. You don't want it too tight or too loose, like it's gonna fall down. Yep. Did we nail it?
Yep, it's all good.
Okay, great. So obviously Meredith is wearing a strapless version, which is one option of what you guys can make. But also we have, hold these for me there, Mare.
Of course.
Thank you so much. Spaghetti straps and wide straps. So you guys can do a variety of things with these. You can do, for example, I know we talked about it already, you love a wide strap halter. Guys, you see? And the reason we have this pin at center front is because what we would do is, may I please have a safety pin?
Yes.
Thank you. Is just with your safety pin, position one side of the strap, and then when we go to the table, we're gonna take this measurement here and make this side equidistant. So Mare, if you were looking in a mirror, you'd get that effect. So it's the same thing with the spaghetti straps. What you guys would do is pin it in place. Hold these for me. You just want to be really careful with the spaghettis because they're teeny tiny and you don't want to pin yourself. So if you feel more comfortable pinning on the outside, totally okay. So again, you're gonna pin. If you're doing this on yourself, you can put the straps on where you think they may go in the front and in the back and then adjust as needed. So you guys get the idea with the straps. Cool, Mare?
Yep.
You can handle this, right?
Yeah, we got it.
All right, great. So the other great feature about this dress are the side seam pockets. So I've pinned it down. Why don't you let me know where you feel comfortable putting your hands in a pocket?
Yeah,
so it's pinned down to about here.
Right here is good.
Okay, so what you guys want to do at home is take a look in a mirror, take a safety pin, and go ahead and just mark that side seam You could do it on one side. Again, you can transfer the measurement about where you want, if you can turn for me, where you want the top of that pocket to be. So if your hand is sitting about there, Mare, does that feel comfortable?
Feels great.
Okay, cool. And then as far as the dress length, I mean, I love the long version on you.
Yeah.
I think it looks really, really cool. So in order to get your hem correct, what you want to do is measure from the floor up. Mare's a designer, she knows that you want that hem to be parallel to the floor, because if you have a butt, chances are you turn to the side, it's gonna hike up more in the back, so you wanna measure evenly from the floor. This is the part I would say, probably call a friend, or if you're by yourself, it might take you a little longer to do, but it's worth the time to get a really nice even hem, don't you think? So, we're gonna measure from the bottom up. So the length I think is great.
Okay.
We'll take off the slightest bit. You wanna hold that for me, Mare?
Of course.
So what you guys are gonna wanna do is pin every few inches. So Mare, I think we'll take the slightest bit off, so why don't we go ahead, and I'm going by the 26-inch mark off the floor. Now you guys are gonna wanna pin every couple of inches. I'd say every 4 to 6, moving the ruler. So again, we're at the 26 mark. This is gonna give you that really, really perfect straight hem. And you're gonna continue all the way around. When you get to the back, it's a little tricky, so you may have to try it a few times if you're alone, but if you have a friend, this is really easy. They just jump down on the floor, which is what I would do for you.
Yeah.
Put your pins all the way around, and then we'll take it to the table and work on the rest. Okay, so now that we have the right fit, what you wanna do is trim down that seam allowance, which we left at 1 inch, to a 1/2 inch on each side. So really simple now, you guys. You just fold it in half, pin it in place, you don't want a lot of bulk inside, so that's why we're trimming down the seam allowances. I suggest 1 inch seam allowance because I wanna make sure that when you fit it, you have a little bit of room to play. If it's, if it's too tight, you can let it out a little bit, because once a panel's cut, it's cut. So we're gonna go ahead and pin down. Make sure that those edges are matching up. If you feel more comfortable chalking the line before you cut it, go ahead and do that. So we're gonna continue pinning all the way down. Okay, so like I said, if you want to chalk that line, we're cutting off a 1/2 inch. So grab one of your little rulers here, line it up on the edge at the 1/2 inch mark, and go ahead and dash. All right, and we're just gonna cut through this line. So you're gonna do this all the way up. We're gonna grab our scissor. I'm just gonna show you this section. I'm just cutting on that line, and then we're going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do this. Pin marking, mark your new seam allowance line, which is 1/2 inch on all 4 side seams, 2, 3, 4. So you've trimmed down all your seam allowances on your back and on your front to 1/2 inch. So now we have our front and back panels. So if you remember when we tried this on Meredith, we did a pin for pocket placement, okay? So this is gonna be different for everybody, depending on your arm length, sort of where you like to have your hands in your pockets, but Meredith's was placed here. So we are going to measure from the last line of smocking. We are at 5.5 inches. So where we placed that pin, I'm gonna go ahead and give us a teeny chalk line. Okay, so where our pin was, you can take that out now. And I'm going to mark 5.5 inches down on each side seam, front and back. So let's go ahead and do that. Same idea here, just from your raw edge, marking down 5.5 from the last row of smocking. Little chalk lines, you guys. These are just indications. And sometimes, be careful, chalk will show through after you iron this tailor's chalk off. So try to keep your marks in the seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch. So we're good here. So there's our front. We're gonna repeat this on the back. all of our side seams are marked for the pocket placement. So this is kind of the fun part. You're thinking, how do pockets get attached to this? Really, really easy, just follow the steps. Here we go. All right, so we will take our back panel here. Your kit came with 4 pockets already cut. Here's what they look like, okay? So I'll lay it on the table. The pockets go together like so. Up here is where you attach at the top. So you see, this is gonna fit into the side seam, and there's your pocket inside the dress. But in order to sew these together, we're not going to sew the pocket piece first, which you may think, how does this work? Here's how you do it. So lay your side seams flat. You're gonna do this on all 4 side seams with the fabric right side up. So the side of the fabric that is shown to the world. So we're gonna find the corresponding pocket piece. Now, you want to remember everything has 1/2 inch seam allowance. Down our side seam, it's already built into the pocket piece. So there's our 5.5 inch notch. I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch down on our pocket piece to accommodate for seam allowance. So we've got our right side and our right side. I've marked a little notch on our pocket. What we want to do is put right sides together, like so, with the notches aligning right along the side seam. Do you see how this goes? Then we want to pin this so that we're going to sew straight down on the side seam. Now remember, when you're pinning, to pin in a way that's most comfortable for you to sew. So for me, I'm going to take the entire piece, I'm also a lefty, and pin it this way, because as I sew through the machine, I want my pins here to grab the head. So again, those notches are lined up. Great. Pinning around a 1/2 inch from your side seam, making sure these 2 lines, the raw edge of the fabric body and the raw edge of the pocket, meet every 2 inches or wherever you're comfortable. Pinning nice and flat, lining up those edges all the way down. Okay. So we're going to do this on the other side. So we're sewing the pocket to the body with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the top and the end. So now we're going to put an edge stitch a 1/4 inch away from the seam where we attach the pocket to the body on the pocket side of the fabric. So we'll jump over to the machine. With the sewing, it pretty much did it for you, but we want a nice, crisp, sharp seam. So go ahead, grab your iron, pressing nice and flat. You see all the seam allowance is now flat from the back. We have a nice, sharp, flat line on the front. Go ahead and do that on the other 3 pockets. Okay, so you've sewn the 4 pocket pieces to all the side seams, and this is what your pieces look like now. I call these pockets ears when it looks like this. Okay, so you've got your front and back panels. They should look exactly the same. So we can take a look. We've got this little stay stitch line. It's going to help keep the pockets in place. So now's the fun part. We are going to sew the side seams together, including the pocket bags. So let me show you guys how to pin that together. So you've got your front and your back panels. We want to lay the right sides together, right? So the outside of the fabric is on the inside for this pinning. This is really easy, and up till now you've sewn everything so perfectly and accurately it should go together like a breeze. So you want to start at the top of the smocking, and you guys, when you're pinning your smocking together, make sure that the lines of smocking meet up when you pin. We don't want to put this together and then have these off, right? So very carefully lining those up. It's really nice actually because they kind of work in your favor because you can look through and make sure that you are pinning through both, which I am. So what I like to do is start at the top, then I'm gonna put a pin at my last row of smocking. This just helps you align everything and then fill in between, pinning every couple of inches. Again, making sure that that smocking lines up nicely. So I'm gonna continue pinning everything together. Remember, the pockets have a 1/2 inch seam allowance as well. Okay, then also when you come to these corners, remember that you've got a little pointer here, a 1/2 inch seam allowance, okay? So as you're stitching up, you're gonna come 1/2 inch over and continue up. See how easily the seams go together? Everything's matching up the way that it should. So you're gonna repeat these steps on the other side seam, and we've got an inside out dress. So I've got the side seams together on the machine. What we're gonna do is sew down the entire side seam. So I'm gonna sew this with you guys, but if you feel more comfortable stopping at certain spots when you hit the pocket, for example, and stitching that on its own, that's fine. Just make sure wherever you start and stop, you have a back stitch. So as I'm nearing the pocket area, I'm gonna slow down a little bit, and I wanna make sure I stitch 1/2 inch below the top of the pocket bag, like so. So I'm 1/2 inch beyond. Now here you can either back stitch and sew the pocket on its own, or you can pivot by making sure the needle is in the fabric, lifting the foot and turning, and then work your way around the curve of the pocket bag, like so. So again, as we reach the bottom of the pocket bag, you want to get to that 1/2 inch point, lift your foot, and pivot to finish the remainder of the side seam. Okay, so time to put our straps on. We've got our center front and our center back. Do you remember we put in the straps to create a halter for Meredith? And we want to make sure that the straps are equal distance from that center front pin. So all we need to do is measure the distance from the front to the inner edge of the strap. So we've got 4.5 inches. So I'm going to put a safety pin here because we're going to need to take these off. So this is going to indicate the inside of this strap. So 4.5 inches on one side, and then 4.5 inches on the other side. I'll flip this around for you guys. So these pins are now equidistant from that center front and indicate the inside of each strap. So I'll just place this one here and we'll have them at an equal distance. So what we need to do now is pin the straps inside so that we can stitch them in place. So to pin these, I'm going to remove one strap because we've got our indication here with our safety pins. So I'm going to flip this inside out. I'm going to do this so that you guys can see it from your side. Okay. So these straps have the raw edge where we kept it open to turn them. What we're going to do is place the edge of the strap about 1/4 inch above that first row of smocking. I'll pin this in place and you can take a look where it is. Okay, so now what you want to do, we want these straps to be clean finished. We're going to flip it back, roll it down about 1/4 inch below that first row of smocking. Place a pin. Pull our first pin out. Place another pin, just make sure it's secure. And now we've got our strap in place to sew. We're going to stitch a line above the first row of smocking and below. So from the front, your strap will be in place. So go ahead and do that on the other side as well. And from the inside, you'll have a clean finished edge. So as I'm sewing the wide straps in place, I want to make sure that I stitch on each side of the first row of smocking. So I'm going to put one row of stitches 1/8 inch above and another row 1/8 inch below. Make sure you back stitch with these. Okay, so I worked with Meredith and I finished pinning her hem for her with safety pins. What we're gonna do now is flip it inside out, chalk mark these pins, and connect the lines for our hem. So you can see we've got all the little pins. I'm just gonna go ahead and do a very light chalk mark where our pins are. Go ahead and do that all the way around. Then you're going to remove your pins. And you want to grab your little trusty clear ruler and go ahead and start marking in between all the lines, just connecting them. And this is going to give you that perfect hem we were talking about. So same thing here, continue all the way around your garment. Okay, so we've connected the chalk line all across on our actual hem, a nice even line. Now I've magically got a threaded hand needle. So you want to choose a thread color for this that is a contrast. We're going to do thread tracing. Thread tracing basically works as a line we're going to put in, a quick running thread that we'll be able to see from both sides of the garment because we want to see it on the inside and the outside. and we'll be able to pull it out when the garment is finished. This is better than marking your garment on the right side. It's there, but it'll pull out very easily. Here's how we do this. So you've got a threaded needle. I'm gonna throw a quick knot in one end, and you're gonna do a really large, super basic stitch right over your chalk line. So as you're doing this, make sure you're not going through both layers. So just follow my hand here. This is the way that I do it. I just kind of pick up and push all the way on that line. Again, like I said, this can be a large stitch. You're gonna see on both sides. I'm just gonna keep running this along my entire hem. Okay, so we've done the entire thread trace around the hem. Now what we want to do is add 1 inch seam allowance. So grab your ruler, this one's 1 inch, makes this super easy, and your chalk. So now we mark the 1 inch seam allowance with chalk. We can go ahead and cut that off, making sure we're only cutting through 1 layer of fabric. So we're gonna run a stitch a 1/4 inch away from our thread traced hemline. Okay, so we've got that straight stitch a 1/4 inch below the thread tracing. What you need to do now is fold this up. So you'll see you can see it from the right side. I'm working on the wrong side. We're gonna fold it up and pin it in place right on that line. So this is why we put that stitch, because it's so much easier to fold on a pinned line than trying to roll without. I'm gonna keep going, you guys do the same thing, and we'll head to the sewing machine. Now we're going to be running a stitch line 1/8 inch away from the 1/4 inch line we just folded on. So it will fall halfway between our thread trace and that 1/4 inch line. Okay, so now what we wanna do is trim away the excess here. You gotta zoom in and take a look where we just put that stitch, the 1/8 inch away from the edge. We're gonna trim as close to that edge as possible. Be really careful when you guys do this. You wanna make sure that you don't snip through to the front of your dress. So, really carefully, we're gonna cut in. I'm turning this so you guys can see. You wanna make sure you're really comfortable holding it, kind of cradling it in my hand, and just running the scissor as close to that stitch line as I can. If you guys wanna take a look how close I'm cutting it, it's about 1/16 of an inch away from that stitch. So we'll continue doing that. Okay, so we've trimmed that 1/16 of an inch away all the way around successfully without cutting through. Now we're gonna head back to our machine, we're gonna fold on our thread trace line and finish this baby hem. So now we're putting in that final stitch for the baby hem. It's 1/8 inch above the thread trace line. So you wanna sew very carefully. So with your baby hem finished, you can go ahead and pull out that thread trace. And your dress is finished.